everybody. Welcome to our Get Into IT live show, and welcome to Friday. We made it, everybody. We did it. We did it again. So exciting. Hope everybody had a great week. I'm so happy to see you here on a Friday at noon during your lunch hour. I really appreciate you joining us here. We have a great show lined up. Let's go ahead and get started. So today we are talking about the job interview, which is a very important topic and something that a lot of people can learn from, even if they've been to 1,000 job interviews in their life. So let's dive in. I have a wonderful guest here from our career services team here at MyComputerCareer, Tim Pillard. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure and happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we wanted to bring in somebody who knows exactly what companies are looking for in IT candidates right now. So again, appreciate your time being here. And I think we're going to have a really wonderful discussion. And this is, for anybody, like I said, even if you've been to 1,000 job interviews, if you're actively job hunting right now, thinking about a career change or just curious about what modern IT interviews look like, because we will get into it. A lot is changing in the scope of interviews. You will want to stick around for the next however long we have to discuss this. So, Tim Pillard, you are the Assistant Director of Career Services at MyComputerCareer. We are so grateful for you. You've spent over 15 years helping candidates land their dream jobs in IT, and here to share some insights and practical tips that you can use in your next interview. Sure. Very excited to have this conversation. Let's dive right into it, shall we? Of course, as always, we've got Aaron and Caitlin monitoring the comments. If you guys have any questions for Tim here, even if you're actively watching this after we have ended the live, this will be up on our Facebook and our YouTube and our Instagram. You can still ask questions. We will monitor those. But if you have anything to say, please put it in there, even if you just want to say happy Friday. We appreciate your comments. So let's dive right in. I have a question to really get this started. Like I said, a lot is changing in the scope of the hiring process, especially now because AI has entered the chat. AI is involved. What should candidates know, even if they don't know that this is a thing at all? Because I feel like, I didn't know that this was a thing. What should candidates know about AI-powered interviews? And do you have any tips for handling them?
Sure. Well, I don't know if they're 100% new. There've always been recorded interviews, right, in the past. And so I think they're just growing and developing, evolving, just like anything else, especially in the IT space. And so now, instead of just having the record it where the question was asked of you in written form, they can have, an image of someone that asks you the question, that's programmed to ask the question. So it feels a little bit more natural, maybe. I think it can maybe make it easier, right? Because you're looking at a face, it's actually speaking to you. And so maybe it feels a little bit more natural. But I would say the best tip is to speak clearly, communicate clearly. Same tips that you would give in a normal interview. Make sure you're in a quiet setting, a quiet room, that your surroundings and your background look great. And most of all, answer the question. So you get asked a question. One of the methods that I've always been trained on was the STAR method: situation, task, action, and result. Right. And so when you get asked a question, try to explain the situation, the task that you were trying to accomplish, the action that was taken, and the results that came from it. Right. It's almost like telling a little bit of a story. And so I don't think that changes from an in-person interview to the AI interview. I think you want to act as natural as you can, be yourself, and answer those questions to the best of your ability. And, just try to be yourself.
I think you just created new merch for us with this STAR method. I love that. I will definitely be utilizing that. I mean, that's not just for, I feel like you could use that in so many different facets of your everyday work. I love that. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the AI thing I've discovered that in a article. I think it was, in one of those CNBC's articles. I didn't even realize AI was now, of course, but I didn't realize that was part of the interview process now. And that can definitely seem intimidating because you don't want it to hear you wrong. You don't want to say something wrong because that could that could really mess up what you're trying to convey to your potential future employers. So
it can. Well, just so you know, there's actually practice tools out there available as well. So not only are you going to see it in the normal interviewing process, and it's a screening tool, right? So there's still going to be an in-person, you would think, after that initial AI is asking you questions and you're answering. There's probably going to be an in-person interview at some point. It's usually that first step screening tool, right? And so it's going to be there to kind of filter you in or out of the process based off of some of the answers that you're giving. But hopefully, if you've studied that job description well, you know what the object of the role is and that you can speak to those things clearly, you should be successful in making it through that stage or phase.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I can imagine these days too, people are getting thousands of, applications in, so they do need to.
They are.
But you heard it here first, folks. Our AI overlords have not taken over just yet. Humans are still involved in the process.
That is right.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the oh so ubiquitous discussion of how necessary college degrees are.
Yeah.
This has been, just constantly in the news because companies seem to be a little less interested, not all companies, but some bigger companies too, might I add, such as like Walmart, seem to be less interested in degrees and more focused on certifications and hands-on experience. How can candidates best showcase their technical skills during the interview process?
Well, I think for IT interviews, at some level, you're going to get asked technical questions, right? And so they're going to hear those answers to those questions. And it could be something for entry level as basic as, what would be the first 3 things that you would try to do if someone was not able to connect to the internet. And so it may be as simple as a soft reset to start, right? You're going to do a soft reset on the computer or the modem. And then they're looking to see what you would do next and what you would do next. And so it really becomes not only about the answer, but what does problem solving look like, right? How do I, if the first thing that I tried doesn't work, what leads me to that next step that I'm going to take, right? And they're trying to gauge where your knowledge is too, right? And so what do you know and what don't you know? And I think it's okay to not know things as well. So if you ever get stuck, I think that's all right too. I think you show a willingness to learn or be transparent about it. And so technical interviews, knowing, studying that job description and the company, what they do, how they do it, it should help you to prepare for when you go to that interview.
Well, even troubleshooting in itself is important. So if you say, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Part of that is, but I will figure it out.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In this day and age, you can pretty much throw anything into YouTube and watch an how-to video. Need to change the radiator out of your car. You can find it step-by-step procedure out there on YouTube, I'm sure.
I've had to do that. Yeah, I had to do that. Was I successful? Maybe. It's a story for another time. I do love the trends that are going around social media now where somebody brings their car in and the mechanic is over there on his phone. How to take it out.
That's right.
The internet is at our disposal, y'all. So
it is.
As much as people would probably hate to see this, remote and hybrid work is here to stay. I think we have proved in most situations that this is an effective way to work.
Yeah.
What are IT employers specifically looking for when it comes to working in these remote and hybrid environments?
Yeah. So they want to know, and it's interesting because it very closely relates and ties to how you want to present yourself in the interview. A quiet space, a good background, that you can be on time, right? that you know how to manage your time effectively. But that you're also going to be there. I think the challenging thing that people sometimes worry about with remote work and things like that are they actually there working? So there's a lot of trust that comes with that. So making sure you're available, making sure you're at your desk working when you're supposed to be during those hours. And, but it is definitely here to stay. That's for sure. It's highly desired. I can tell you now, when you're applying to remote positions, you're probably in an applicant pool that is 3 times as large as an on-site position.
Yeah.
So you're certainly competing against a lot more people for those remote jobs because people want them. It provides work-life flexibility, right? I don't have to spend an hour in traffic to and from work every day, right?
Amen.
Then it's taking my 40-hour work week to a 50-hour work week if I have to drive somewhere and do those things, right? And so it provides a little bit of flexibility for work-life balance. And so, but it's definitely not going anywhere. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. I really love working from home.
It is. Me too.
This is something we kind of already spoke about in the terms of AI in these job interviews, but I guess in a similar vein, companies are using video interviews. You're still speaking with humans. We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but can you also discuss, any secrets to making these video interviews feel more natural for somebody who is potentially applying to, I know you said, like being on time, good background and stuff like that, but I guess, do you have any more advice on making it appear more natural? Because I
do
talking over a screen here. Yeah,
absolutely. I would probably say the best thing that you can do, and I've mentioned it already a couple of times, is preparation. If you take the time to dissect that job description to understand what it is that they're looking for, do research on those items. You can Google it. You can throw that stuff into Google and ask, or nowadays ChatGPT, right? You could throw that job description into ChatGPT and say, based off of this job description, what questions could I expect to be asked? And it'll give you probably a pretty good, list, and you can tell how many you want, 10, 15. Take a look at those, right? How am I going to answer that? I think the more preparation you do, the more natural it can seem, right? Because the more comfortable you are with what's required, the better you'll be able to speak to it. And so to me, it's all about preparation and research, practice. As much, as anything gets better with practice. Have somebody ask you some questions and run through it. That's why we provide mock interviews at MyComputerCareer.
Yes.
Right? It's so that you have some practice. So that's not the first time that you've been asked the question. Anything with practice usually gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we really, make sure we remind people of, is the career services is here to help you, and they can help you do stuff like that, like mock interviews. Yeah. It's incredibly important and a tool we should all be leaning on. Absolutely.
100%.
So certifications, speaking of my computer career here, certifications are a big part of an IT career. How should candidates talk about them in training during these interviews without sounding like they're just reading off of their resume?
I think practice helps, as always. I guess it would be just knowing what they know. What knowledge did I get from that? What practice did I do? Being able to talk about it or speak about it would be important. I think a lot of our students probably explore things at their homes. Everybody has internet at their house. They have Wi-Fi. They've got a computer or a laptop. They've got multiple devices probably hooked up to that internet. Have they created a VPN at home? Are they a gamer? Do they build their own computers? I think there's a lot of real world experience that you have that doesn't have to be in a work setting, but could also be talked about, right? What do you find fun? What do you find interesting about those certifications? What was challenging about them? Sometimes you could be very forthcoming about the challenges that you experienced as you were going through the program to obtain that certification. I found this part of it really, really tough, but here's what I did to overcome it. Right? I think that makes for a great conversation. I don't think that you have to pose it to be something that you're not, nor sounds piece of paper. I think be honest and open and real about what you enjoyed, what you loved, and maybe what was challenging, and some of the things that maybe you do around your house, or maybe you've applied it in a previous role. Tech and things like that is invading every space, as you mentioned. We're working remotely. I've got internet. I got to troubleshoot things at times here just myself, to be able to be up and running sometimes. And so, I think there are some previous experiences that they might be able to talk about, even if it wasn't an IT role, right? So being relatable to those things, or being able to communicate in a relatable way to the interviewer would be most important.
You heard it here first, folks. If you're a beginner to IT, if you work from home and you troubleshoot often, you're already doing good.
A lot of it, 100%.
We get that question a lot
Yeah.
on our social media pages. Hey, I only know how to turn on a computer. And every time we say, come on in.
Yep.
Come hang out. It's a good time. So speaking of, hi, Rick. Hello. I got stuff about borrowing.
Good.
All five. Oh, nice. Interview respected my answer that even took forever to get it. Yeah. We appreciate you, Rick. Garrett here underneath Rick says, I had one employer ask how many PCs I had at home. Sorry, I clicked that at the same time you did, Aaron. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, PC building is no easy feat. I did it barely once, and that was enough for me. I respect it as an art. It is tricky.
It's interesting. I work from home. My wife works from home, and I've got a couple of kids. My 11-year-old needs his own laptop to be able to do his homework. They submit things online nowadays. So everybody's connected. And like I said, multiple devices, Xboxes, TVs, you name it, it's out there. And so got your own little networks running at home.
I love that. And Aaron included a question here for us. Is there an advantage in considering in-office gigs on the flip side of?
Absolutely. What a great question. No, I 100% encourage you. If you're willing to go into the office and it's something that you're like, hey, I don't want to be trapped in my house all day. Yes, there is an advantage. There are going to be less candidates applying for those roles, and you are much more likely to get your resume seen or talk to somebody, in my opinion. I've done recruiting where a remote job could be posted and you could see 800 applications in a matter of 2 or 3 days, versus an in-person role being posted for weeks and not seeing a quarter of that, right? So you definitely gain an advantage if you're willing to go into the office. There's no doubt.
Wow.
Great question.
Yeah, thank you for that, Aaron. Yeah, because I'm over here gushing about remote work, and Aaron's like, ask him these other questions. Love it. So we're talking about IT changing constantly, right? We brought up AI now being involved in the interview process. How can, we talked about skills also. How can candidates show they're committed to keeping their skills current?
Yeah, I think you have to. Technology is always evolving, right? There's always new things coming out. How can they stay committed to it? Microsoft comes out with updates every year. They come out, they keep updating things, they do those things. Stay abreast of them. LinkedIn is a great resource for those types of things. Here we are on LinkedIn right now watching this stuff. You guys do great talks with all kinds of awesome people. That's a great way to stay connected to the industry. We had already talked about YouTube, but there's other short courses. There's LinkedIn Learning, right? LinkedIn offers a learning platform where you can do just little bits and segments. There's things out there like Coursera or Udemy. Those things can be very helpful, but I think you just have to always be willing to learn, and you have to be curious, a little bit about how things work, or, just stay in tune with those types of things. There's ways to follow it on social media, groups that you can join, blog posts, subscribe, have stuff emailed to you, a newsletter emailed, or, sent to you every month. There's lots of different ways, but, just know that it's always going to change, and stay curious.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is somewhat related, but last week we had a wonderful conversation with a Cyber Warrior program graduate, Jason Tassone, and he was talking about heavily leaning on his peers as well.
Oh, yeah. Great resource.
Yeah. And of course, the instructors are there for you as well. And he gave just as much praise to them. But like Jason talking about, having a Discord page and being with your peers and studying together and making sure that you're, you can lean on these people. Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, this next question is actually something, that was on the list of questions, but myself, Patricia, would like to know this as well, because I'm very bad at this. Okay. I don't like, I should, and I'm encouraged constantly by my significant other to talk about myself and brag about myself. And I I cannot. I'm not good. I am not good at doing that. So, of course, companies want to hear about you. They want, people who bring something new and fresh to the table, or just want to hear about you in general, fresh perspectives and different approaches. How can candidates highlight their unique strengths without bragging, sounding boastful? Is this a time where bragging and being boastful is completely acceptable, or?
Yeah, I think like anything, an interview is definitely a time to brag a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, everyone has their own unique strengths, and they should be okay with talking about them. I think you know what you do well, and you know what you don't do well. I think everybody usually has some pretty good insight on that. But it definitely is the time to shine, right? But I also think you can do it. It's kind of like in sports. Every once in a while, it's one thing to have confidence. It's another thing to be cocky, right? And so if you can just display the confidence part of it, I think you're in good shape, right? You don't want to come off, cocky, I guess is a good word for it. But so there's a healthy balance to anything, and so with that confidence, also be humble. There's nothing wrong with being humble. That's a great strength to have.
Yeah.
You know?
I get very quiet when it comes to stuff like that, but good to know that in the interview process, I can brag all day as long as it's relevant, I guess, to the topic.
Yes, 100%.
The job you're applying for. So in this process as well, this is something else, and I'm going to skip over a question here. I'm going to go to the next one because I think we've kind of hit on, ways to effectively talk about, the next question was, what tips do you have for handling these kinds of stressful practical evaluations? And I feel like we've kind of hit on that already, unless you wanted to dive into that anymore.
I don't think so. I mean, we can reiterate it, and it's just prepare, research, practice. The more you do that up front, the less stressful it becomes.
Absolutely. So something else that I don't do good at is, I guess, talking about salary, but that is a huge thing to bring up, and not in a way of, hey, how much money I'm going to make, but in a sense, right? And that it's a more upfront topic these days. So, there's new laws about pay transparency as well. How do you navigate the conversation of salary with also not sounding too much like a jerk, but curious?
Absolutely. Salary is a big part of finding a job just in general. And you're right. There are lots of laws surrounding that at the moment. Some states have required that the salaries be posted in the job posting. I think and I liked it. I like that they are. It eliminates a lot of confusion. You see a job posted with no salary, you have no idea. You're like, is this in my range? Isn't it in my range?
Right.
I think that conversation of salary is very, very relevant just in general. You want to make sure that you're not wasting people's time, right? If the employer is looking for somebody that is willing to take $45,000 a year, then, hopefully they put it in that job posting. Then you get candidates that are looking for $45,000 a year. And that doesn't change for 60 or 70 or, whatever it might be. Having some sort of range in the job posting helps. But as far as the interview goes, that first phone call from a recruiter, which I've done in my past, a lot of times one of the first things I would, or one of the things I would cover is, are you okay with this range? Because I know that's what we're hiring in. So if you are, let them know. And if you aren't, let them know. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to waste the candidate's time. And hopefully the candidate doesn't waste the employer's time either, right? Like, don't hold out hope if somebody says, hey, are you okay with 45 to 50,000, that when you get to the end of the interview, they're going to pay you 70, right? Like at that point, you get to the end of the interview and interview stage, they make an offer and they say, hey, we're offering you 50. And you say, oh, well, I need 70. You just went through weeks of back and forth, scheduling interviews, all that other stuff. And really it wasn't going to work out. So I think just know what you're looking for, be open to clearly communicate that when you can. And as long as you're close, you're okay, right? So there's maybe some wiggle room there, once in a while, especially if you're really experienced or can bring a lot to the table. There's some negotiation there. I usually say, don't bring salary up until the employer does, and if that's when they make an offer, then, wait till then. And then you can say, hey, thanks for this offer. And if you think you would like a little bit more, you can kind of negotiate that.
And I feel like if you were to do a job search or, look for jobs, you'd probably be more comfortable applying to the jobs that do have that
Oh, yes, I
listed.
agree. I think employers, if they include it, definitely see an uptick in applications because people know what they want and what they're looking for. And so they put the application in. And you're right, they hesitate a little bit if they don't see it,
Yeah.
right? And so they're like, I'm not sure. I don't know if I want that job. So they might not apply.
Yeah, it seems to be more of a legit posting as well.
Yeah.
So we have a question here from Garrett. What about renting a remote space? I've heard about this rather new approach where you can rent a desk/workspace to get out of the house and be in a somewhat corporate environment. I've worked in some of these myself, but there would be others renting desks with other companies. Have either of you had peers who were able to draw pluses versus minuses?
So from my personal vantage point, I've had people ask about it. So when I was doing recruiting, I remember saying, "Hey, do you guys provide a stipend for a workspace or things like that, so that they could be outside of their home, in a quiet space?" And I think that it just really depends on the level of the position, right? If it's a very entry level role that pays, $18 to $20 an hour or something like that you're stepping into, there's probably a little less opportunity for something like that. But as you move up the ranks and you maybe are a manager of some sort or kind of mid-level, maybe moving in that direction, there could be some opportunity to negotiate some stuff like that. Certainly when you're getting the offer, finding out. Think that was definitely a little bit more prevalent right around COVID too, and people weren't going to office. People need to use office space. There are people working remotely. What do I do with it? Hey, I'll offer it out, right? Somebody wants to rent it. Come on in. We've got the space, right? So I think there's some options for it. I don't know that it's a commonality, if that makes sense, or that, everybody's doing it, but it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, when I did it, it was for a brief period of time, and it was, just a summer internship that I did, and it was very interesting being around people who were just working on completely different things.
Yeah.
Granted, I wasn't doing any sort of IT work at the time, but it's neat. I liked it because it is something just a little different than your own house.
Get you out of the house. That's right. Get you out of the house.
So it was cool. I liked it. But that's a great point too, to bring it up to the employer and say, hey, is this an option?
Right.
Or do you do something similar to that already? Yeah. Great question, Garrett. Thank you. All right. Let's talk about something that, let's talk about trends. Okay. What catches you off guard in IT interviews these days? Are there trends that you're seeing that candidates should know about if we haven't touched on it already?
I think it depends because there's so many different types of roles. But I think you need to be prepared for anything. And I'll go back to saying, do your research. There's lots of resources out there like Glassdoor. You can research a company. There's things that they talk about with interviews. At a company I previously worked at, it was not uncommon for them to put up a whiteboard during the interview and allow you and actually see you work out the problem. They wanted to see your problem solving steps. And that was most important. You didn't even need to get the answer right, but they wanted to see the way that your mind worked in terms of step 1, step 2, step 3, and how you got there. And so I think you need to be ready for anything. Hardware type positions. It's not uncommon. POS person, I know, went on an interview, and the interview was show up at the establishment and all of the parts were sitting there, and there was no like, hi, it was hi, how are you? But after that, there was no questions. It was like, here are the pieces to the POS system. We would like you to put it together, and you have 45 minutes to do so. If you're done early, come on back and get me. And so I think there's a lot of things that can happen on a technical interview or an IT interview. And it's going to be related to the type of role that you're applying for, interviewing for, right? So hardware technician is going to be different than, customer service, troubleshooting, support versus, network architect or infrastructure, things like that. So they're going to be a little bit different.
That is interesting. Way to figure out real quick if you can do something. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
That is cool. All right. Last question here. It's a big one. What advice, if you could give one piece of advice, I guess, for somebody interviewing for their first IT role right now? And I think this is a good question too, because I think it could also apply to people who have worked in IT before as well. But what would that one piece of advice be for somebody going into their interview?
Yeah. So I'm gonna just lightly smooth over the first couple, which was prepare, do your research, look at the job description, know the company, know the role. So that's the very first piece of advice. But if I could give one really, really important piece of advice, somebody that's interviewed a lot of people in my lifetime, help people through the interview process, it would be to not only have done your research and prepare, but ask really, really good questions at the end of the interview. It can help you stand out over other candidates. And what I mean by really, really good questions, I call them thought-provoking questions. A lot of times people, when they're coached to do an interview, they're told to ask questions at the end of the interview. And you get questions like, can you tell me what's most challenging about this position? Or, what growth opportunity is involved with this role? Is there opportunity for growth? I think those are very common questions that a lot of people learn them, get coached on them, or get coached to ask them. I would say take those questions a step further, right? And if those are things that you're interested in, don't just ask what's challenging about the job. Look at the job description and identify things that you think might be challenging. Understand what the business model is for the company, and then say, hey, based off the research that I've done and looking at the job description and research in your company, I noticed that, probably one of the biggest challenges you guys, someone in this role might have is XYZ. Do you feel like that is accurate? And what do you guys do to, overcome that, right? Like, show that you've put an extra level of thought into that question. And what it will do is it'll make you stand out from all the other candidates that just come in and ask the same mundane type questions at the end of the interview that they've been coached to. I'll never forget, there was a time when I'd done 8 interviews in a day. And at the end of the day, I needed to put somebody out to work the next day, and my assistant had come over and they had said, why don't you just give Jane a call? And I was like, who's Jane? And she's like, we just interviewed her like 3 hours ago. Just give her a call back. And I was like, I didn't interview anybody named Jane today. Sure enough, I had. When I went back to my desk and I looked at my calendar and looked at the files, I had interviewed Jane just a few hours before that. And it wasn't that the interview was bad. It wasn't. She was a very fine individual, right? And but there also wasn't anything that just really made her stand out either, right? And so she just kind of, when you're doing a lot of interviews, things kind of run together. But if you ask really, really thought-provoking questions at the end of that interview, the interviewer won't forget you. They're going to remember that last impression there. And when they think back, they're going to be like, man, I interviewed all these people, but nobody asked as good of questions as they did, right? And they're like, I really like that, So I think if I could give any advice, it would be ask really, really good questions at the end of the interview, put some thought into it. I said thought-provoking. If you can make the interviewer think, to have to answer that question, you're going to be in good shape. And then it's just remember to prepare, right? Prepare, research, preparation will make it come easy, and be yourself. So I think that's, if I could give one piece of advice, that's what it would be.
I love it. Agreed, Jessica. Agreed. Well, it's interesting too, because the employer is not going to go into an interview thinking that they're going to be the one answering questions.
No, that's
so
right.
Going to be something that you remember.
Yeah.
For sure.
And don't be afraid to ask them throughout the interview too. Like if they do ask you a question and you give an answer, you want it to be like a conversation. At the end of an interview, if it felt like a conversation, it probably went pretty well. I tell people too, Patricia, and actually this is really important to know, not necessarily advice, but the interview's the win. If you made it to the interview, it's the win. It really is. I know a lot of people hang their hat on it's I got the job. It's making it to the interview. Once you get to the interview piece of it, they're usually 5 very qualified individuals, and you never know what you're competing against. And what I mean by that is, did somebody else get referred to the job? Do they know somebody? Is there somebody internal interviewing? There's so many questions that lie behind that piece of it. And sometimes there just isn't it could have been the best interview in the entire world, and it's still, you probably maybe weren't going to get that one job. So just know the interview is the win. And if you've made it that far, everything else is working, right? Like your resume is working, you're applying to the right type of job, you made it through the screening phase, maybe you made it through the first interview, made it to the second round, right? And so when you get to that interview process, just know that the interviews are the wins and that the job is not too far away, right? And so it's going to come. The right job, the right opportunity will line itself up at the right time.
Well, what a great note to end on. This is fantastic. I learned so much. I hope you guys did as well here in the chat. And I really appreciate all your comments and your questions. This was great. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you having me, and happy to help in any way that I can. And hope you have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend.
Yes, Friday. I know it's going to rain here in North Carolina a little bit, but it's okay. We'll still have a good weekend.
That's right.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We will be back next Friday at noon Eastern time. Please come hang out. We'd love to see you. And again, I appreciate your time, Rick, again, of course, in the comments, Garrett in the comments. Jessica, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Tim, thank you again for your time. If you don't mind hanging out just for a little bit while I end the live. And again, I'll see you guys in a week.
Thanks so much. Take care, guys.